Hey guys, welcome to another OrCAD X how-to video. My name is Adam, and today we're going to go over a very simple topic, which is how to create your electrical, spacing, and physical constraints in OrCAD X. Now, what I have open here is OrCAD X Presto, and this is going to be a fairly short video because creating constraints in OrCAD X Presto is really very simple. So we're going to go ahead and jump into the Tools menu and open up the Constraint Manager. Now the Constraint Manager is essentially your one-stop shop for creating, managing, exporting, importing, everything that needs to be done with constraints inside of OrCAD X Presto. On the left side here, we have what is called the Worksheet Selector. And as I mentioned before, we're going to be talking about three different constraint domains. The first one is electrical, the second is physical, and you can click these and expand and minimize the other ones. And the third one is called spacing, or you can even group spacing and same net spacing together. Now, as you click and expand each of these, you'll notice that there's a couple different worksheets which you can access, and they're grouped into the constraint set worksheets and the net worksheets. Or if you're in the physical and spacing domains, you'll notice that there's the constraint sets, the nets, and then also regions. Now regions is basically constraints that exist on the board, but in a specific area or region of the board, rather than being global to a whole design. So let's jump into the electrical constraints, and I'm just going to click on the routing section and wiring. Actually, let's look at vias. I like to use this as an example because it's very easy to understand. Now, in order to create constraints, usually the first thing you want to do is group all of your nets into things like net classes, net groups, maybe differential pairs if you have some differential pairs in your design, buses. But for the purpose of this video, we're going to just look at how to assign or create and assign some simple rules. In the next video, we will talk about how to create those groupings. So keep an eye out for that. So when I'm in the net section and I look at the vias worksheet, I can start to add some constraints. For example, the maximum number of vias that I want to allow for a net. Now to assign a value, you simply click in the cell corresponding to the column, which is the constraint you want to assign, and the row, which is the net you want to assign it to. And here you can just type in a value like 4 and press enter. Now when you type in 4, you'll notice that some of these columns turn yellow, and that basically just tells you that there's some sort of error with, in this case, in the electrical domain, analyzing the via count for this net. If you hover over it and look in the bottom left, which is right here, you'll notice that it says DRC analysis mode is not on, it's read only. So what that means is this rule is actually checked off, and even though we set a constraint, it's not going to check for it until we turn it on. And to turn it on, simply you right click on any column that's yellow and select analysis mode. And when it turns gray, that means that it is on. Now, if we were to analyze this rule, you'll notice that we now have some values here that show up in the actual via count, and it says 2. And now we know that there are no errors with this rule for checking. Now you might be thinking, wow, that's a real pain to type in, 4, 3, 4, 4, whatever our maximum via count is for these nets. Rather than typing these in individually, what we do in OrCAD X is create something called a constraint set. So if we jump into the constraint set section and also look at this vias here, you'll notice that we have our row here called design. And if we right click on it and select create electrical constraint set, actually let's call this ADDR. What we can do is create a rule which we can then apply to either a single net or multiple nets at a time. And that rule will carry with it, for example, the maximum via count, which we set in the constraint set. So for this ADDR or address constraint set, let's set the maximum via count to 4. And we'll jump back into our net routing vias section. And here you see that there's a column called referenced electrical CSET or constraint set. If I clear this for which we typed in earlier, I can highlight all of these address nets and select the ADDR constraint set, and you'll notice that it automatically types in the number 4 for us in each of these rows for the vCount max column. So what this allows you to do is define multiple constraint sets for the different requirements in your design and assign those to groups of nets or different groupings like net classes, net groups, to very quickly iterate through all the different nets which need to be constrained in your design, again, rather than doing it one by one, which would take quite a while. Now the same thing applies to your physical and spacing nets. If you look in the constraint set section and we click on all layers, we have a default constraint set. And again, we can right click and select create physical CSET. We'll call this digital. And let's say that in our digital constraint set, we want the minimum line width to be 10 mils. And if we go into the net section, we can then assign that digital constraint set to, for example, our data lines. And here you can see that these automatically inherit the 10 mil line width. Now don't worry, if you have, for example, a specific requirement for, let's say D3, you can override that with the number 11. And even though it still belongs to the digital constraint set, you can see that this blue font and bolded indicates that we've actually overridden that value, and we want it to, just be maybe a little bit different than the rest of the members of that constraint set. Now, another way to actually assign members to a constraint set, which I personally don't use very often, is if we right-click on the digital constraint set, we can then apply this option here called Constraint Set References. And let's say that we want to add these control signals into, we want these control signals to use this constraint set for, setting the minimum line width. Then you can highlight these and then use this right arrow to add them to the references, press OK. Then if we jump back into this net section here, you can see that the referenced physical constraint set is now digital. Again, same thing applies for spacing and same thing applies for same net spacing. So hopefully this was a brief and short introduction on how to set constraints in your design. We have more specific videos on each of the different domains, for example, your electrical domains, your physical domains, how to set things like bi-layer constraint sets if you need different line widths on different layers. So look out for those videos, and also we'll have some webinars covering these topics. Thanks again for watching, guys. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below and we'll try to get to them as soon as possible, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks.